Hello and welcome back. We're here on In12D. We're in season 3. Can you believe it already? This year is flying by, and today is episode 25. And today is a cool day. I know I say this every week, but this one's really, really cool because this is like the common denominator day where how Ramzi and I actually met each other, Ramzi being my co-host. I'm going to let the story unfold naturally itself, but let's just say that our special guest today is the common denominator, how we met. So Ramzi, I'll let you introduce our guest for today. We're so excited to have her here.
Well, I'm excited too, Susie. I would like to introduce Suzanne Tempel. Suzanne is a leadership coach, author of Awakened Mind trainer, and a director of the Institute of Awakened Mind. After a powerful turning point in her life, she left behind a high-pressure career to explore a radically different way of living, one rooted in inner clarity, intuition, and consciousness presence. Susie and I, we took a training course with Suzanne about Awakened Mind. I believe it used to be called AMM at that time. It was around 4 years ago. And it had made a huge impact on our lives, on how we perceive the world, the seen and unseen, and everything in between. And today, my question to you is, how did that course or training that we took back in, let's say 4 years ago, I'm not sure exactly the date, how did that evolve to what you're giving in training today?
First of all, let me tell you that I'm quite honored and privileged to have you here as hosts and me being a guest, and see you again and see how you have evolved and making nice products for the world. So thank you. What I do today is basically a natural extension of what I already did. As an awakened mind trainer, I train people to altered states of consciousness. And one of the things that happen when you move to altered states of consciousness, now whether that is deeper or higher state of consciousness, extraordinary events happen as a natural progression of altered states. So the course that you took that was basically a natural extension of me being in the Netflix documentary
Surviving Death.
Surviving Death, exactly. It was made after the book that Leslie Kean wrote. She's an investigating journalism about life after death, basically. And so I was interviewed as somebody who would measure with EEG mediums. And so one of the mediums in her book, Stuart Alexander, which is an English medium, was one of my subjects as well. And this is how we met. And at that time, I was also teaching altered states of consciousness to mediums, because you can't do mediumship in a normal waking state, basically. So that was then. And what I do today is that a natural progression of that. I was trained by the Institute of the Awakened Mind, which is a legacy of what Anna Wise did and Maxwell Kate. Those are the founders of the method that I'm working with. And Judith Paddington, which was the last assistant of Anna Wise, asked me to fill in for her, basically, as she's retiring. So that is how I came about to be the director of the Institute. And in the meantime, my clientele changed, most from people who want to be doing something with spirituality to people who basically own businesses or are entrepreneurs. But those can also be people who have, yoga schools, or people making a business out of spiritual services.
So that's really cool. That's really a natural evolution there of just the work you were doing, and it, like, for us both personally, it was really interesting to see what we were capable of, I guess. You know what I mean? It was like putting something that I knew about and I had been studying myself to the test in the sessions that we did. And it's funny that you mentioned the Netflix documentary, because that was how I got into it in the first place. I was literally watching that documentary, and it came to me to look something up, and I had signed up for the course before I even knew what it really was. I got a bit of a land when
Yeah.
I realized that the method was through mediumship. I was a bit like, oh, I think I'm in the wrong place now. But that was a really interesting kind of experience for us. But what we'd love to kind of bring it back a tiny bit more is the podcast. Every week we talk about ordinary people living extraordinary lives. And so there was obviously for yourself, Suzanne, a time when, you were just plodding along in your corporate environment, working like everybody else, and something must have shifted, or something happened. Was it a very specific experience, or was it gradual? I'd love you to share that moment for you, that shift.
Sure. It is a story that is quite extraordinary. At least I think so, and I'm sharing it in my upcoming book as well. I was for a long time as a child. I have to say, as a child, I had many mystical experiences. One of them being an out of body experience, but that's, I think, in itself not extraordinary, since there's lots of children, believe it or not, who have mystical experiences or extraordinary experiences. But as we grow older, as we gain or reach adulthood, we tend to forget those, and they will never happen again. With me, it sort of stayed, but I always thought, or this is how I was brought up, that women should be able to financially take care of themselves, etc. So I went into the corporate world. I was a manager, an operational manager. I did some interim jobs. I was a project manager for um, our government for a while, and I worked many, many hours. I was very driven. It was something I liked and I was good at, but I totally forgot who I really was. And so one of the nights, I lived at that moment, I lived in Rotterdam, in Holland, and I worked in Amsterdam. And one night I worked late again. And so I think it was about 7:30 in the evening, where I went up to my car, which I basically lived in at that moment. I had an apartment, but I made such long hours. I stood up very early in the morning, and then um, I ate in the car, and so it was a mess. So I stepped into my car and thinking to myself that I might as well live in the car because by the time I was home, it was time to go to bed. So I drove up to the highway, put my feet on the gas pedal, and I tried to get home as fast as I could. And I was nearly home. I was on the highway near in Rotterdam. There's a ring, right? A highway ring around the city. Which at that moment you could drive, I think, about 100 kilometers an hour, and I was like doing 140, totally irresponsible. But I was, speeding, and at that moment, I noticed that my eyes went funny. First, it was a little bit blurry, and then I felt a little bit lightheaded, and then I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to go out. I'm going to get a blackout. I'm going to pass out. That's how it felt. My heart started racing, and I couldn't see anymore. It just went completely black. And I wasn't panicking at all, but I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm glad that it's not raining. And at the same time, I thought, why does that matter at this moment that it's not raining? You can't see. You're driving 140 kilometers an hour. There's no way to go. You either end up dead or you're having an accident and severely, injured. So I was rationally talking to myself. And then I was also blinking with my eyes, hoping that my sight would come back. But that never happened. And I went out completely unconscious. And then the next moment I remember is when I woke again, my hands still on the steering wheel. The car was in an exit. So apparently I drove through an exit. I was standing in front of a stop sign near my house. And the stop sign was red. And I never was able to explain this. I later on read, when I dove into this material of the consciousness and the mind and how the mind really functions and what we think we can do and what we're actually capable of. I never heard stories like that. Afterwards, I realized I wasn't the only one. This happens to actually not a lot of people, but some people. And that was something I couldn't explain at all. So first of all, next day I went to the hospital and had myself checked out because I thought, okay, there must be something really, really wrong with me. And that was a turning point in my career because I was definitely overworked. And I didn't even notice that until I passed out on the highway. Yeah. And that should have been my death, actually, but it was the birth of a new life.
Oh, that's an amazing story, actually. While you were saying that how you passed out, all I could see is you moving into a different realm or a state of consciousness.
I did.
While
Yes.
there was if you want to call them angels or guides or whatever it is, on a spiritual, taking care of the physical part of it while you were doing what you had to do.
Well, I can't confirm that because I wasn't aware. But yes, when we talk about altered states of consciousness, I was definitely not in a normal waking state, nor was I sleeping. But I wasn't aware of anything that happened. But apparently, physically, I was able to steer a car, move away from that highway into the lane I actually should have exited. So it was near my house, and I stopped my car apparently in front of a red stop sign, and I up until this day, I don't know how I did that and whether I was the one doing it. Yeah.
So did you
Yeah.
pack up your job then? What happened? Like, so you did a lot of research, obviously, once you got yourself checked out, and is that how you kind of changed trajectories then in your professional life?
Yes. Yes. So first of all, I realized when I went to the hospital that they couldn't explain what happened, and they thought because I explained what I felt prior to it, etc., etc. And so the guy or the doctor, who was a very young guy, by the way, a very nice doctor who did some tests with me. He said, "Well, I can't explain what happened, but I'm aware of the fact that you're hyperventilating right now, when I was like hyperventilation. And he says, yes, I can't explain the fact that you passed out, because apparently with hyperventilation, the blacking out or the passing out, it doesn't happen at the same time, right? That's impossible, apparently. So he said, I can't, medically explain what happened, but you're hyperventilating. And I was like, hyperventilating? And I realized that my whole body was exhausted. And so I called in sick the next morning, or something I've never done in my whole career. I called in sick, and I stayed sick for 6 months. And I started to recuperate with the same with the same enthusiasm and drive, trying to make my body better, as I did with trying to ruin it, basically, by not eating well and living in the car and drinking coffee. And at that moment, I smoked as well. And yeah, I was really trying to destroy myself, my body, in a very unconscious way. And yeah, so it took me 6 months, and I was completely healthy again. So I changed careers. Yeah.
Okay. What methods did you use to get yourself from that state during that 6-month period where you were not feeling well physically?
Mm-hmm.
What methods did you use, or did you take courses, or did you take meditation?
Ramzi, I
Advance your
tried it. I tried it all. I did breath therapy. I did yoga. I did meditation. I went to an osteopath. I went to did acupuncture. I went to a Chinese doctor. I have a whole list of things that I tried in those 6 months, because I was desperate to be up and running, and being healthy again. So I tried it all. And the one thing that stayed with me, that I benefit the most from, was solitude. So being on my own, not dealing with telephone and people and stuff like that, and take walks in nature. And so, but apart from that, I really tried it all. I really did. Yeah. I don't believe there's any alternative therapy that I didn't try at that moment. Yeah.
Actually, walking in nature and meditation, they're kind of similar thing in a different
It
formats.
is. Yeah.
As you know, Susie is a meditation expert on our channel, and I'm one of those people that cannot do meditation, sit down and cross my legs. I have a hard time with that. But my meditation practice is to walk in nature or walk on the beach and just
Exactly.
release myself from the world and be
Yeah.
with myself and nature.
Yep. So believe it or not, I get a
Yeah.
lot of people who teach meditation as clients as well, because obviously they're interested in growing to higher states of consciousness. And I always recommend to people in the West not to meditate as you're taught, not, sitting cross-legged, because we're simply not able to do that. We haven't been taught as a child to do that. So so sitting upright in a chair, that is basically the best way to start meditating. But also meditation brings you to a point, at least the Western way of meditation, it brings you to a point, but it doesn't bring you beyond this. It reduces the thoughts, it reduces beta, teaches you how to, I'm not native English, you can hear that. But it teaches you how to focus. But that all reduces beta. It doesn't bring you to a pattern in your mind where brainwave pattern that gets you to a higher state of consciousness. You need to move beyond that, basically.
So what is that point? How do you move it into that point? What training do you take, or what training are you giving to help others to switch? Like, it's one step further, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's two steps basically,
Okay.
because the first step is to reduce thought, right, and learning how to focus. This is what most meditations do. You focus on the breath, you focus on the flame, you focus on a mantra or something. So that is the focus. You move from a wide focus to just one single thing. And the meditation itself reduces thought, so there's less thought. But you have to move beyond that. You need to start creating a bridge to the subconscious. That is step two. And then when you have that bridge to the subconscious, you need to clear out that subconscious, because everything that we ever do, we ever experience in our life, we store in our subconscious, the nice things, but also the not so nice things. And so those things that have been troublesome or even traumatic, those will hold us back from growing to a higher state of consciousness. So first, we need to clear out the subconscious. It was, I think, Jung who said, you don't get enlightened by imagining figures of light. You get enlightened by making the darkness conscious. And what he meant, obviously, is that your darkness is your subconscious. This is something you're not conscious of normally in a day-to-day basis. And that means that you need to access that darkness, that subconscious that holds all those troubles, those traumas, those emotions that you have stored there, or things that you haven't processed properly yet, and deal with that. That is step two. And then you can reach what we call the first higher state of consciousness, which is the awakened mind. But there are higher states beyond that.
Okay.
So making the unconscious conscious, basically,
Yeah.
it's that tapping
Yes.
in is what you're talking about.
Yes.
I I think it depends on everybody's background. I've witnessed people as a teacher have very spontaneous uh, moments of in whether it's awakening or kind of forms of, like a mystical experience, so to speak. So without
Mhm.
any formal practice or training or anything. And,
Sure.
I think that as humans, we have this potential capacity within all of us, untapped,
Absolutely.
and it's not
Absolutely.
like, so how are you tapping that? Like, so you're working obviously with a lot of leaders and, in a more corporate setting now.
Mhm.
And is that what you're working on, Suzanne? Is it like tapping into that potential within a leadership
Absolutely. Absolutely.
environment?
And what you said, Susie, is very important, because some people do have those experiences in a quite spontaneous way. I never meditated in my life apart from that small period of 6 months, um, when I tried to recover, right? And I couldn't do it. Just like Ramsey, I couldn't, my whole body was aching, and, my mind was all over the place. Nevertheless, I tried it. But that is not how I move to higher states of consciousness. And most of my clients never meditated. So, especially the corporate clients, they never meditate. And yet, I bring them with exercises, I bring them to a point where they are able to access their true creativity, which is in the subconscious, and use their true intuition, which is in the subconscious, and tap into that field of knowledge, so to speak, that we can all access, but most people never become conscious of it. So it's a natural part of the brain, or a natural ability of the brain to be able to do that. But we simply unlearn to do this as we move from young people to adults. And a part of the problem is that we lose our alpha bridge, that bridge to the subconscious. Children still have that. Children usually have very little beta, and they have still that bridge to the subconscious. When children are playing, for instance, soldier or whatever, and the chair is a horse. And you as a mom, you're going to vacuum the room and you move the chair. They say, no, mom, you're moving the horse. To them, that chair is actually the horse. In their minds, they can still see that chair as a horse. As adults, we totally learn or I have to say, forget how to do that. But you can only do this if you produce enough alpha in your mind and if you have reduced beta. And so for those people who have spontaneous experiences, or as you said, Susie, never meditate, those people still have that alpha bridge that they had as a child. They never lost it.
Yeah,
And so
I think
their move.
another way of maybe training it, I don't know whether you'd agree with this, is people who are naturally more creative, maybe people who are musical or artistic or, very kind of aware of things like that. So I think part of what happens as we become adults, depending on the culture that we grow up in, is that we're conditioned. You're conditioned to think and work in a certain way. And I think for me, a lot of the work that I do through meditation as a practice is releasing those limitations, those, whatever is kind of holding people back, which is usually something that was kind of drilled into us in a formative age, to whether it's a belief about ourselves, or we can develop, I don't know, like, maybe phobias or anxiety around things.
Exactly.
And that's in the subconscious, which is probably that dark part, which you're saying is holding us back from, that creativity, I guess. So do you have a method? So what I'm curious about your how you're working it now, not meditation, but in your, is it the mind mirror or?
Well, it's part of what I'm using, which is a big part basically, is the awakened mind method. That
Mhm.
is the method that we take people to altered states of consciousness, either deeper states. The meditative state is a deeper state, as is trance, and those are temporary states always. But we can also move them from a normal waking state to the first higher state of consciousness, so the awakened mind, or even beyond that, to a universal consciousness or an evolved mind. Those are higher states, by the way. And I do that with the awakened mind method, but also I'm using Jani, which is the highest form of mindfulness in Tibet. It's the 9 stages to calm abiding, which is actually a very practical way of teaching people to discipline the mind, basically. But I also have scientific, like the awakened mind, neuroscientific based methods that I'm helping people to overcome trauma. And that is a very important thing, because there's a lot of people who are traumatized in one way or the other, either in childhood because they're bullied, or they have been in an accident, or they have been abused or whatever. So there's a lot of people out there having trouble in the subconscious and having trouble of letting go, and you can't move to a higher state of consciousness without dealing with that. So this is also why I have in my toolbox some methods based on neuroscience that basically chemically, because a lot of people don't know this, but trauma is also chemically encoded in the brain. And so there's no amount of talking that can get you out of the trauma. And that means that you need to chemically erase it, but you need to know how to do that.
I'll just jump in. While we were doing the AM training, if you recall, I think it was year 2, I got blocked.
Mm-hmm.
I connected with you, Suzanne, unblocked. I don't know what happened. It's not working. I lost it. And we did, I can't remember, 2 or 3 sessions. And this is what you were talking about. There was, of course, just a quick overview. I lived through traumatic war when I was young. and I must have held certain trauma that was sitting somewhere in my subconscious, where for some reason it kind of like surfaced and did something, and I couldn't see anymore. And you took me on a couple of journeys. All I remember was there were a release of energies.
Yeah.
It's either through tears or through emotions, or it doesn't matter. Each one is different. So something just released
Yeah.
through every session that we did. And after that, I was able to be able to see or talk to spirits, and it kind of like opened up a wider door, not only for the mediumship part that we were doing, but it actually opened up a wider door for me to be able to move forward, because these were like shackles
Yeah.
that I'm not aware that I'm wearing, yet I'm putting a lot of force to move forward, but they were holding me back. So that's
Exactly.
the type of work that you've done with me, and I can vouch that that had opened up all. It cleared up my path to where I
Yeah.
am today, because enabled me to be able to see clearer
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah.
where I'm going.
Yeah.
And these were done through I don't know what they're called. I call them a journey. So you took me on a journey, and just like that, I it just erupted. Something erupted, or not erupted. Basically, you shook something within the psyche that it opened up, and then things started to flow, and then
Exactly.
released all the trapped energy. I hope I just put it in a layman term.
Well, this is exactly what happens basically. Never mind the technique, um, but always, whenever there's trauma, there's stored energy, either in the body or in the mind, or within the mental aspects, which is also emotion, and chemically in the brain. So it's stored basically everywhere. And when we do a session, when I take you to the subconscious and we work there, the whole purpose of that is that that energy is released. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you have within your body more flow, less blockages, and also in the brainwave pattern, there's
Mm.
more flow. So energy can flow very, very smoothly from the unconscious to the subconscious to the conscious mind and back. Yeah. That's the whole purpose.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because that is something that I struggled with, unaware that that's what I was struggling with. And one of the main things, and for a lot of people who are listening right now, is that trauma does separate you from your body, and you're acting as two separate entities, not connected in any way. And that training, or those sessions that I took, it just regrouped the two pieces that were separated into one, whereby I was able to get back in. Well, it's literally get back into my body. That's how it actually felt.
Yes. Yeah.
Susie,
So
any questions?
I do. I have so many. There's so many aspects to the work that you do, Suzanne, because I was looking through your website, and so outside of the awakened mind training, you have like a subconscious healing, which I think is very much what Ramsey was just describing there, if I'm correct.
Exactly. Yes.
And then you have super normal. This is the bit that I get very excited about. Super normal mind training was where you're kind of bringing in the psychic abilities with sort of,
Yes.
I guess, it's personal development, but 'cause I'm really interested in that development of the psychic abilities of people, because for me anyway, when I developed through obviously working with you, and then continuing on after that, I could really feel like when intuitive stuff hits come, I was able to trust it more. I was able to kind of say, all right, you know, I didn't question it as much and I didn't push it away as much. I sort of welcomed it in and I became more familiar, I would say, with that intuitive kind of hits that I get. And I would always encourage people to, follow their own intuition. So can you give maybe a definition and expand a little bit more on, the super normal mind training? Because I'm really, really interested in that.
Yes, well, like I said in the beginning, the supernormal part of the mind happens spontaneously when you move to altered states of consciousness, which is also very well documented in the Tibetan tradition. And it's just the moment where you were able to get something from the field. So your radar, the delta brainwaves, pick up something from the field and you're able to bring that to the conscious mind. That is what's happening. And we call that, supernormal or whatever. But it's actually quite a normal aspect of the ability of the brain. When you're in a normal waking state, which is a state where most people are in, which is actually a very distinct state of consciousness, so it's not just you being awake and not asleep, but it's actually a very significant brainwave pattern that you're showing. When you're in a normal waking state, then you have no ability to pick up something from the field or to have intuitive insights or to have extraordinary or extraordinary or supernormal experiences, simply because your brain doesn't function like that. It's like a radio, right? So when you tune your radio, for most people the radio is not attuned properly, so they hear the song but it's very crackly and it's not a very clear signal. And so because it's not a very clear signal, they either or it's only static, right? There's no music at all for most people. So they think there is no music, static is all there is, but that's not true. So when you train your brain to show a certain pattern, or in other words, to move to altered states of consciousness, the range that you can pick up gets broader and broader and broader, and all of a sudden you can get jazz music and classical music and what have you in a very, very clear signal. And so now okay, the music is out there. I just wasn't able to hear it, right? And because the music is in the air, but you need a tuned radio in order to hear it. And this is exactly how your mind and your brainwave pattern function. And so for most people, it is true that they only hear static and then they think, oh, that what you can do is paranormal or it's not even real for those people. And it's simply not real because they don't experience it. They don't hear the music. Yeah.
I love how simply you put that. just you're not just hearing it. You need to tune in your radio.
Well, that is actually what I do. I train the brain with EEG and without EEG. So it can be both. And so I train the brain to show different patterns. And with that different pattern come an altered state or a different state of consciousness. Okay. Yeah. So either a temporary state, which is a deeper state, or it's a permanent state. It's not for people always think that whatever they experience in some sort of a mystical way, that is a temporary state of consciousness. And the experience is not the state of consciousness itself. So the experience might be temporary, but the fact that you're experiencing it means that there is a state of consciousness that is happening there, that is at that moment a steady state of consciousness.
So you're sort of
Does
training
that
to
make sense?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think what you're saying is you're training the mind in such a way to maintain that state.
exactly. It's like just learning to play the piano, right?
Mm.
So at first you can't play the piano. I can't play piano, but nevertheless, this is just an example, right? So you're playing the piano and you do it with two fingers and it doesn't sound like anything, okay? And then all of a sudden you start to learn to read notes and you can, play a tune. And no, but not everybody becomes a concert pianist, right? But in the end, when you train yourself, you can play rather well piano, unless you're disabled. But no, normally people can learn how to do this. And so you can't unlearn it, right?
Mm.
Once you know how to play the piano, that's it. And that means the same thing or that is the same thing for the brain. Once you train your brain to show another pattern, that is the new norm.
Yeah, I get it. That's how it is actually when you do develop the psychic ability. And when we were working through mediumship, it was really interesting. It was almost like you could just switch over, and when you were in the breakout room, suddenly, the information was there, like whichever sense it was coming through, it was very, you could just kind of tap in, and then equally you could sort of tap out of it again, so that you're not walking around with kind of, spirits hanging around you all the time. Mind you, I've had experiences where I've had what it felt like spirits where they're trying to get my attention to pass on messages and things like that. Do you still do any dabble in any mediumship or work with any mediums anymore, Suzanne? Or
Sure,
it's like a
sure, but
byproduct of that state, isn't it?
Mhm.
um, uh, I to answer the first question, yes, I do work with mediums. So
Yeah.
what I do, I teach mediumship, but not in a traditional way. So what I teach them is to train their mind and therefore train their state of consciousness in a way that is how do you say that, is beneficiary for their mediumship. So their mediumship improves because their state of consciousness is improving. And at the same time, because I've been teaching mediums for such a long time, and obviously I'm also a certified teacher for mediums, I also train them in techniques, like in the traditional way. But that is, not the first thing that I'm teaching them. Primarily, what I'm teaching them is to use their mind in a very different way. And so the information comes more naturally, the flow is more naturally there, and then they can, progress in that way. It's not helpful to teach people techniques when their state of consciousness doesn't change.
Mm, absolutely. And I recall one of the first things that you did when we took the course was to clear our preconceived ideas and any baggages, if you want to call, in our subconscious before we were able to move forward. And that was the first one or two classes that you had given us, and
Yeah,
you gave
yeah,
us a lot of homeworks at that time to just release anything, even things that we did not like or liked. We had to
yeah,
detach ourselves from that so that that does not affect the way we see or look at spirits or
yeah,
communicate.
yeah. The hardest thing is to work with mediums who have with professional mediums. Um, the reason is because they're so stuck in their ways sometimes that the mind is not flexible enough to learn.
Mm,
And so you have to, with most of them, you have to take two steps back, train the mind again and then start the mediumship, but that is not what they want to do. And so sometimes the most professional mediums are the hardest to work with. I like to work with newbies, people who just discovered that they have either psychic abilities or they have seen spirit for the first time in their life, and they're very open still. Yeah.
Suzanne, you've mentioned a couple of times your training through the Buddhist practice of, it's like an advanced mindfulness practice. I can't remember how you pronounce it correctly. How do you
Rani,
say it?
Rani,
Jani.
Rani.
Okay. I'm really fascinated by, some of the Tibetan Buddhist teachings and trainings, especially things like dream yoga. I've been doing a lot of research
Yep,
into that.
yep.
I'd love to know, is that what your kind of day to day is now? Are you practicing that, or how did that come about?
I have always been interested in the Tibetan culture. Basically, even as a teenager, um, I was, wearing T-shirts with Free Tibet and stuff like that. Um, I have sought several teachers in throughout my whole life. So Buddhism and Buddhist practices have always been an interest of mine. Not so much the meditation part, believe it or not, but the way they deal with the mind. And so the psychology of the mind and the very extensive way they have made a science of the mind. That I think is really, really fascinating and resonated with me for since I was a teenager, since I had my first out of body experience, which I couldn't explain. So that sparked an interest in consciousness and the mind and the way the two relate, and even to a point where we have to talk about the true self and the nothingness or the suchness. So I'm a Buddhist. I call myself a Buddhist. So the answer is that my interest wasn't sparked, it was always there. So it must have been, there when I was born. So probably it didn't come from my parents. My parents don't have anything with Buddhism. So I was never taught anything about Buddhism when I was a child, but the interest was always there. So I started to search for things. So I think it's a resonant, maybe from something from another life. I don't know. But at one point, I found a teacher, and I did. Well, it wasn't really a course, but he taught me and several others, not me, just me, but he taught me how to do Genie and how to become a teacher. So I'm actually in his lineage. I'm, a teacher of Genie. Yes.
And is that like a more open awareness, kind of a mindfulness practice? Is that how you would? Can you describe it? Because I'm not familiar with Shini at all. I don't really
Okay,
know it.
Journey is it's also called the 9 stages to calm abiding, and it teaches you basically the steps, 9 steps, how to train the mind. So
Ah,
how to train the mind to higher states of consciousness, basically, but in a different way than the awakened mind, because they teach you to observe the mind, and they teach you the faults and the way the mind behaves and the antidotes, what to do if the mind does this, what to do if the mind does that. And so it's a very practical way to teach the mind to focus first and then move from focus to calm awareness to abiding, just simply in awareness.
That just sounds yummy. It's I'm going to definitely do some more research on this because they're just some of these beautiful ancient techniques that I really feel like are part of who we are. Really, we just have to, like you said, remember them. It was always resonant there. It was there for probably since you were born, and then when you kind of come across it throughout your life, it's like it's a natural sort of I suppose you become attracted or magnetized towards the teachers and the books and the practices that help us
Exactly.
evolve. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is how it happens, it's you're naturally drawn to something, or at least I
Mhm.
am in my life. I'm naturally drawn um, to things that I need to do something with. Yeah.
I think we have this innate, or there's somebody on the other side just pushing when there's something that actually resonates with our life path. And I find it fascinating how I, in my own life, was pushed or driven to get to somewhere so that the story can unfold the way it's supposed to be.
Exactly. You told us that before we actually went live, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And
Interesting.
it's fascinating. I'm intrigued. One more thing. I know you talked about the Buddhists, but you also at one point in time you were working with the Monroe Institute, weren't you?
Yes, very briefly, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. So, uh,
But
you
Judith and some other trainers of the institute still are. Yeah.
okay, and part of their philosophy is also to use sounds in
Yes.
order to take you into different levels of consciousness, or
Yeah.
to move through brain waves.
Yes.
How how effective are these, and how can we um, do you use them also in your training, or there's a totally different way of allowing people to change their brainwave without using an external factors like sounds, or maybe meditation or something? I hope I
Uh,
worded it correctly.
there's a lot of questions there. I'll try to answer them one by one. Yes, well, I believe that they are effective because it's brainwave entrainment. And not only the Monroe Institute works with brainwave entrainment, this is what it's called, right? What is brainwave entrainment? Brainwave entrainment means that through music and through different frequencies in one ear or in the other, let's say you work with a stereo headphone and there is a difference of 3 hertz in one ear compared to the other ear. What that does is that the brain says, "Oh, I don't like that. There's a difference of 3 hertz. You don't hear it, but your brain notices it, and so your brain starts um, to how do you say that in English? Your brain starts to like equalize that. How do you say
Calibrate.
harmonize that?
Nice.
That your
Calibrate.
brain doesn't. Your brain doesn't like the difference. So what it does, it starts to produce that 3 hertz, right?
Mm.
And so this is a way, when you know what you're doing, this is a way of actively producing, for instance, more alpha or more theta or more delta when you want to sleep. Yeah. So this is why they have those tracks that move to deep sleep or for sleep disorders or whatever. When you then, for instance, in the evening when you're in your bed, listening for half an hour to delta brainwaves or delta entrainment, then your brain starts to naturally produce more delta, which is what you need for deep sleep. So when you're then going to sleep, then you produce more delta, or basically the other way around, you produce more delta and then your sleep is going to go deeper.
Okay.
And so, yes, it works. And yes, that was your second question. I work with some clients with that. Mostly if they're not able to, or they have difficulties of producing that specific bandwidth themselves. So when I see on the EEG, for instance, that they have difficulties to produce 10.5 hertz, for instance, which is in the alpha band, and what I do, especially, I'm really sorry for those of you, me included, but for those of you who are getting older, when you're getting older, you produce less alpha. So you need to work harder in order to maintain that alpha bridge if you already have it. If you're not having it, the alpha bridge, and you want to train it, the older you get, the more difficult it becomes. And so sometimes I give my clients homework where I give them a track with brainwave entrainment for alpha. And so then they do the exercises I give them. That means they learn how to produce alpha themselves. But there's a little support there with the track that I'm giving them. So it's a little bit more easy to produce it. But in general, I don't use it because I prefer people not to be dependent on something else. It's better if they know how to produce alpha themselves without depending on a track or something. Yeah.
Okay.
And there
What
was
is
a third
the
question,
optimal?
I think.
Oh yeah, was there a third question? Sorry,
There
Ramsey.
was a there was a
No.
third question on whether it was also a method of reaching other states of consciousness, right? Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yes, in itself, it can, when done properly, it can be another pathway to move to altered states of consciousness. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So what would be a primary way to induce that alpha state if you were training your mind? Is there any tips you can give some of our leaders, our listeners, especially as you said, if it's more difficult as we're aging, and we're all
Well,
going into that boat, unfortunately. But
well, some
what
of
would
the
that look like?
things that you've already mentioned. You mentioned in the beginning that some people who are naturally creative or musical, or so people who have the tendency to create usually produce more alpha. Why? Because whatever they create, they have to imagine in their mind first. And alpha is the bandwidth that you use when you start to create in your mind, when you start to visualize, when you start to have pictures in your mind or centralize. It's not only pictures, it's also the hearing, feeling, tasting, and smelling in your mind.
Okay.
So
So
these are very
activating
natural ways to produce alpha.
and visualization and activating that imaginal kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, that's something I love doing. I'm very interested in that. Because there's just so much freedom in it. When I've been doing some of the dream work, you can really get very creative if you do the dream sequencing where you finish the dream, and I
Yeah.
think it can really help to induce what I've seen anyway, more lucid states in the dream state. Because I've been very focused on higher states as well. That's been a big part of my own kind of personal research and area of interest, but I always kind of skipped past the dream state or the sleeping, dreaming part. And now I'm really looking into, wow, that's a whole other, anywhere between 7 and 9 hours of untapped potential, just by setting intentions as we're going to sleep, or,
Yeah.
so preparation for sleep. Have you done any work in that area, or are you interested in that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I read some books on it. I did some practices on it. And what they're basically what is basically happening is when you're in a dream state, you're working with the subconscious. And we already mentioned the subconscious being extremely important
Mm,
for a precondition to move to a higher state of consciousness.
yeah.
And so within dream yoga, you're able to face whatever comes up there and manipulate it in a way that I do when I do the sessions like Ramzi mentioned. So the ITP sessions where I bring people to the subconscious. And so you can do that yourself if you are able to lose a dream. I naturally was able to lose a dream for a very long time. I currently don't have lucid dreams anymore. I'm also not that interested in it anymore. But um, you, it's a very good practice if you're able to do it to clear out that subconscious. Yeah,
Yeah, I've seen there's a few people who are using it now as a, to work with people with PTSD as well, that
exactly,
they're looking at the
exactly.
healing
Yeah, and
trauma
this
with
is
that.
exactly why, because they're the trauma is in the subconscious. Yeah.
Wow. So tell us about your upcoming book, Suzanne. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
I want to get the title right. So in English, it's Awake the Leader. And
Exactly.
so you've been writing this, and who's it for? Do you want to give us some more info on that? How can we get it? When will it be out?
It will be out next year, beginning of next year. It is for small businesses, leaders, entrepreneurs. Basically, the reason it is for small or mid-sized companies and leaders, obviously it's called Awake the Leader, so it's for leaders. Um, and the reason it's for small and mid-sized companies is because what especially is important for leaders in small and mid-sized companies is that they have to be flexible, they have to be creative, and they have to be intuitive to have that competitive edge. They don't have the funds of the big companies, right? So they don't get to spend millions of dollars on research and development and then test a product and then remove it from the market again. And then they don't have that. They need to be fast, they need to be creative, they need to be visionary, they need to be flexible, and they need to be intuitive to know what to do and where to go. And also, they need to anticipate change. So my book is for people, especially people who are leaders in that kind of an environment, people who are willing to change themselves, their brain, in order to be able to tap into that creativity and to tap into that intuitive insight and to become more visionary. And so it is a book about training the mind, training the brain to become, and this is why it's called Awake the Leader, to become a more natural leader. Most business books about leadership are about behavioral changes, mindset changes, different strategies. So it's all very conscious. It's on the conscious part of the mind, right?
Mhm.
It's, it's nothing to do with changing themselves, basically. And sometimes, even when it's about behavior, it is on the superficial part of the behavior, doing something else instead of becoming something else and then doing something else. So my book is about changing or awaking that leader, that natural leader, by awaking what is natural within them, a different brainwave state.
Okay. Interesting. I'm going to go sign up. You can go into awaketheleaderbook.com, and I believe there's a place where you can put your email address and we'll
Yes.
get notified. Yeah, I want to be notified first. Looking forward to it. Suzanne, it was such a pleasure talking to you. I know we haven't been in touch for almost 4 years.
Okay.
We are overly excited that you have accepted our invitation to come on our podcast and join our path on bringing in new ideas and showing our listeners how ordinary people can become extraordinary in times like we're facing today, time of change. And your work is all about change from within the subconscious mind, which is amazing. Well, I would like to thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And we thanks our listeners for being with us. We're just a bit over 1 hour, but we're good. And to the N12D listeners, we'll see you next week on Thursday at 2 p.m. We have, I can't remember the name, Susie.
We have a lovely woman who is very connected through nature to trees, to the natural environment. She's an Irish lady. She's almost confirmed, so I'm not going to give her name away yet. But stay tuned next week. I think it's going to be another fascinating journey through the stories of people's incredible, extraordinary lives. Suzanne, I've really enjoyed connecting with you again, and I look forward to signing up for a copy of your book and keeping in touch.
Well, Suzi Ramzi, thank you for having me. The pleasure was all mine. And I hope it doesn't need to be another 4 years before we meet again.
Definitely not.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.